We are joined now by Dan Caine, Managing Director of the Measure Group at Wingfield Scale. Dan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jack.
So we are here on the last day of AGG1 in St. Louis, just a mere few hours left of AGG1 2025. I know we were talking a little bit before we went live here. What are your thoughts on the show so far?
I'm here with a colleague, our general manager, and we have both discussed day to day, almost hour to hour, what we're thinking. And I would say in our line of sight, back over in the 7000 series booths, we love the venue. We love the opportunity. We've invested kind of heavily in the last 5 years in creating a better booth space, a better presentation. When you walk up, you understand what we do. That's challenging for us because we do a whole array of things. Scale company first, turned inventory company using scales, and then survey company with a primary focus on surveying for value, surveying for stockpile measurements, etc. And we've had customers tend to stretch you geographically and vertically. If you can do this, can you do this? So with regard to the show, we feel like we have engaged a different level within the companies. These are guys that use the products, that use the equipment, and they tend to say, my boss needs to see this. Whereas maybe other shows are more the management level, and they are decision makers.
Great.
But you get a mix of all of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been very energetic and very busy. Yeah.
Great. So I know you're obviously busy sort of or maybe not running, but being a part of the Wingfield Scale booth. But, is there anything that maybe you've seen on the show floor, heard about from attendees as far as equipment and technology developments go that have kind of stuck out in your mind so far?
Well, they would be the things that are connected kind of to what we do. So there's always an awareness of potential competitors and or where the technology is leading. So we tend to be, even as a scale company and a survey company, near the edge of what's happening with technology. My team works a lot with LiDAR, for instance, and the applications of that kind of technology are what's changing. LiDAR's been around for a long time. Photogrammetry's been around for a long time. But the applications and the way you use those tools changes all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You look up every 6 months and something you have to adapt.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy to think, we're already almost in April. 2024 has been in the rearview mirror for a second, but I'll ask you to look back very briefly. Can you kind of tell me about how was 2024 for Wingfield Scale?
Wingfield Scale as a company has grown year after year for 88 years now. Family company, third generation, all that goes with that. I would say that it's the vision of this latest generation to marry all of those traditional things and technological things and to look way down the road and say, we need to be here. Now that part of that is because the Wingfields themselves are engineers, accountants, so they kind of hem in, and me coming from the managing quarries, etc., we kind of hemmed in this whole idea of how do you do inventory well?
Right.
How do you kind of write the book on certain aspects of projects, different projects? But very successful. But we also, it's not a downside, but I would say it's having to be very aware of certain things you did in the past 3 or 4 years that have become very commoditized. Everyone has a drone now.
Right.
Well, everybody that has a van.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And everybody imagines that you can draw a circle around a stockpile, and it's all about what you need delivered. If you need to get on the page and understand your inventory, that's one thing. If you really need to use that as a management tool, so we've had to react and be somewhat nimble, as they say.
For sure.
In terms of what services we offer and the tools we use to accomplish it.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, like I was kind of saying, first quarter of 2025 is almost done here. How's the first quarter been? You talk about sort of looking to the past to look ahead. So how's 2025 been treating you so far?
Okay, so this kind of bridges from what we were just talking about, looking in the rearview mirror and now looking down the road. What we have found is the ability to find a partner that has an expertise in certain areas. Mm-hmm. So we, as the survey company, kind of assessed what does it mean to capture, even highly accurately, very accurately, survey grade change detection. How do you take that and realize, this is the accountant speaking, mm-hmm. That's what I've done.
Right.
That's kind of history. And it's important for me to understand the cost per ton, et cetera. But on the other side of that, we said, what if, with regard to inventory of materials or money, mm-hmm. What if we were able to capture in real time the first numbers that hit your financials, the first numbers that appear on your books as inventory value? So the big challenge has always been, until very recently, how do I understand inventory? But again, it's history.
Right.
What we're trying to do is say, if we're coming off the high wall, how can we measure that truck mm-hmm. in an efficient way? And it turns out it's LiDAR.
Right.
So we can measure that truck before it ever gets to the primary crusher. Then we can measure the belts that come out of that primary crusher and turn into different products. Mm-hmm. So engineers get very excited about the opportunities for optimization. Mm-hmm. And then everybody at every level gets excited about the opportunity to digitize what they're doing.
Right.
Because that's where you can really push the information to the people that need it most. So I've become familiar recently with this whole concept of crowdsourcing.
Right.
What better way to crowdsource within your own company with the people that need to be involved in a project, in a product development, or anything that's really going on in your facility? The financial people typically want to see if that number's in the red or the black.
Exactly.
And they've got not one-dimensional, but they've got a particular and specific need for the results. Mm-hmm. But the production guys, the operational guys, the management guys or gals need to understand in real time what's happening so they can react more quickly.
Yes.
They can see the trend mm-hmm. and react.
Yes.
And so we have literally found, providentially, I'd say mm-hmm. with a capital P,
yeah.
that we've partnered with a company out of Germany that has those tools available. We looked at a number of different brands. There are only 2 or 3 really, and fine folks, because we own some of those brands. Mm-hmm. In our journey to say, okay, what's the best,
yes.
or what fits us best, and so we ended up with a company called LASE, laser mm-hmm. without the R,
yeah.
out of Germany. And they're primarily software developers. And we've seen that in the past. If everybody's using the same hardware is available to everybody. It's what you do with that data and Absolutely. How you process that. So when we were in the field doing proof of concepts, we might have 4 different brands on one, for instance, a conveyor belt. Mm-hmm. Now, I pause here and say, as a scale company, we understand well the mechanical aspects of weigh bridges, any kind of scale that you can imagine. Literally 3 or 4 companies that do certified calibration of rail scales. So right. Imagine the biggest you can get, short of a ship,
yeah.
which you can't weigh. And we do that. And then literally we've seen, as just kind of a cute little example, take your business card, zero it on one of our bench scales, mm-hmm. have you sign it, and we weigh the ink in your signature.
Wow.
And Jack, I don't know what your last name is or if you've got an I in it.
It's a long one, and it does have an I.
Excellent. Then we could have you dot the I and we could measure that as well.
That's insane.
So having a category for precision in your mind
Yeah.
is something that really changes the game. And that's what we've always pursued. We've always said accuracy counts.
Absolutely.
So getting that information, getting it real time on a conveyor belt, on an open truck, we've probably also measured, because we spent 2 years developing a rail component for LiDAR. So all of these are volumetric products, but we certainly understand unit of measure densities, and we can apply that, and then you get mass and volume.
Yeah.
And some companies are tracking density of different materials, scrap metals, things like that. So it becomes very, the other side of challenging is very compelling as we partnered with LASE and really pushed the development of some very sophisticated systems in the pursuit of accuracy.
Yeah.
The other more recent is that we found ourselves working a lot for inventory reasons with cement manufacturers in town and across the country, and whole companies coast to coast.
Yeah.
And we saw a need for the ability to do inspections. So one of those ways that customers tend to stretch you is, well, if you're capturing a lot of incidental information with this LiDAR scanner, for instance, a conveyor belt or something structural,
Right.
can you provide that structural scan? Because a lot of the plants are 40 years old, 50 years old. The blueprints, if they exist, don't really look like what's as built right now.
Absolutely.
So we would do that, but then the high value assets within a manufacturing facility, anything with a lot of heat, kilns, mills, refractory, those are pretty old style approaches. Literally, in confined spaced entries, you're getting into a vessel, a stage of the preheater tower, and then you're literally drilling brick to figure out how thick it is.
Yeah.
We have the ability now to map the inside of a vessel, stage 4 of a preheater tower or a kiln, and track that or map it within a square foot.
Jeez.
And when I can do that, having sometimes scanned the exterior, so it's important to understand the thickness of the refractory, and all of this leads to wear management. So where it was somewhat subjective in the past, and or the guy that really was good at that retired,
Yeah.
it really addresses a lot of things like safety, carbon footprint. Those are big watchwords. And bottom line, budgeting. You have the ability to forecast what needs to be replaced in the next outage.
Yeah.
And we partnered with a company called 4D Delta out of Australia. And we're a North American distributor of that product, which is a software platform. And we're boots on the ground and do what we normally do with the tools we normally use in a different application.
Yeah.
So it's just adjusting on the fly, kind of, to see where the pain points are. That's kind of the cliche, but really it's more about providing solutions. And that's part of the vision, I think, of the company itself.
Right.
So that digitization piece is as hard to implement as it is to say.
Yeah, for sure.
And in a merger and acquisition, which will always be around, transitioning and doing that well is the most challenging piece.
Yeah.
And one way to crowdsource or involve employees so they feel like they can take ownership, it's not another company, another brand, it's I'm the company.
Right.
Yeah. Is through that process of creating a digital twin and then sharing that with the people that need to know, and whether it's, again, operations, production, the maintenance side of things, all those people can look at it like a blueprint on the table, but at their computer.
Yeah.
And they can flip it around, look at it any way, look at it like God holding the
Yeah,
earth.
that's right. That's right. That's excellent. That's a lot of good stuff there, Dan. obviously the industry as a whole, the aggregate industry, is in kind of an interesting spot. We've talked to a lot of people that talked about how, there were maybe some customers who were holding off until after the election to kind of see what decisions they wanted to make. That's obviously now in the rearview mirror. A little over 2 months into a new administration, we've got tariffs and different global and different global and domestic factors that are going on. What kind of things are you keeping your eye on, or is the company keeping an eye on from a global and domestic standpoint right now?
Well, with international relationships, the conversions, those things on the money side are always kind of in our vision, in our perspective. We consider it, but I think there's people that are in business do business, and we find a way.
Absolutely.
And I don't think some of those things have been realized. I realize at the same time that nations are reacting, and some positively, some negatively, some with a lot of uncertainty, like prior to the election. But I think by and large, everyone is excited that things are going to change.
Yes.
And generally in a very positive way for business. It's a business leader. He knows business, and he's going to drive a lot, I think, of good things, not to go too political.
Yeah, no, I got you. That sounds good. So all that being said, how would you kind of characterize the current health of the aggregate industry coming off of 2024? I know there were a lot of factors that impacted the industry last year, such as weather and,
Sure.
the especially wet times, the fires out in California.
Right.
And now, again, we're kind of in I know I talked to someone yesterday that said January and February have been sort of unseasonably cold, even colder than normal. And so you're dealing with different weather things now. Again, some of the factors we mentioned before, but taking that all into consideration, what is your kind of picture of the health of the aggregate industry right now?
I would say very healthy, and any area of the industry that was not healthy, there are means and methods, the medicine, that would kind of be on a path to cure,
Yes.
restorative health. And I say that because a lot of times those things don't directly affect us. They come through our customers and the way they react and look at it. I would also say that, in 2024, for the first time at conferences like this, we began to engage people at all levels of their company that would walk up to the booth and say, we now have a budget for innovation and automation and digitization.
Yeah.
And we've never heard that before. Not really.
Yeah.
And that became something that we could really fix on and say, all right, let's keep this conversation going. And we saw quite a bit of success with regard to those tools that we offer for real-time measurements of material. And whole companies at the highest level. Here's an interesting piece. I asked the director of engineering at a major company. We've had a conversation going on since SME back in Denver. And he said, I asked him, I said, why is it that we're suddenly engaging an engineering department? It's usually the maintenance department or the production. And he said, well, it's interesting because, and we go back to the example of mechanical belt scales and why we've been pursuing a non-contact, no mechanical, nothing moving parts. It's not a magic. You get all kinds of data from the system that you're, collecting information on the moving belt. He said, well, what's happened is, and I was very pleased that he could assess it this quickly. Why, he was the director of engineers, right? But he said, well, back in the day, it was the maintenance department. And they got pressure from the finance people who would say, to look at everybody and say, why, we put a man on the moon, why can't we do this? And production would blame. So you had these departments that were kind of pitted against each other.
Right.
Pitted. Yeah, I like that.
I like that. We're going to end on the high note. No, I'm just kidding.
But he said, ultimately, it fell back to the engineers. You guys go find the product or the service or whatever it is that can fix it for all. And all those stresses don't exist. it's really team building.
Yeah.
It's creating a solution that gets everybody kind of pointed in the same direction. It's really amazing to see. It was a beautiful concept to me to understand what was really going on, because we saw it in a number of different companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. I like that insight. It definitely sounds like the industry is, overall in a good place. And I like the way you put it. Kind of anything that isn't healthy, there are some of those sort of cures on the way. So
right.
I like that. I like that
right.
outlook. Dan, thank you so much for spending a little time with us today. We really appreciate your insight. A lot of good stuff. And best of luck the rest of the year for Wingfield Scale.
Thank you very much, Jack.
Excellent.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Dan.